This episode is brought to you by Progressive Commercial Insurance. Business owners, meet Progressive Insurance. They make it easy to get discounts on commercial auto insurance and find coverages to grow with your business. Quote in as little as 8 minutes at progressivecommercial.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Coverage provided and serviced by affiliated and third-party insurers. Discounts and coverage selections not available in all states or situations.
One. Welcome to another Britflix podcast. My name is Stuart Wright, and today's guest is one of the co-founders of Mayhem Film Festival, Steven Sheil. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for coming over to Broadway Cinema in Nottingham, and good to chat to you.
You are about to celebrate 21 years of Mayhem.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes me feel exhausted saying that.
So give us the dates when it is.
It's the 16th to the 19th of October here at Broadway Cinema. So it's 4 days of brand new, mostly horror, sci-fi and cult cinema.
And where can they see it? The Broadway's where?
Broadway Cinema is in Nottingham. So it's 14 to 18 Broad Street in Hockley in Nottingham. And we take over the biggest screen in the building, Screen 1, for 4 days.
So cast your mind back then to 2005. What were you thinking Mayhem would be? And then how much has it stuck to that path, and how much has it changed over 21 years, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, when we started, there was three of us. There was myself, Chris Cooke, and another friend of ours, Gareth Howell. And we were talking about film festivals, horror film festivals that we'd been to in the past, things like Dead by Dawn and Black Sunday. And we were saying, and we'd started doing kind of like horror all-nighters around each other's houses, where we'd go round to, one of our houses and we'd watch like 5 horror films in a row.
Yeah.
Most of us would watch 5 horror films in a row, and occasionally a few people would drop off by about the third one. It'd just be me. Remember me and Chris just being left watching Cradle of Filth at about 5 a.m. one morning. So we wanted to do something like that. There was nothing like that happening in Nottingham. And at the time, I was already based at Broadway Cinema, and we knew the cinema really well. So we approached Broadway initially with the idea of doing a horror all-nighter, and they said no. At the time, great start. At the time, I think that there was not the horror audience, or not perceived to be the horror audience. No, let's put it a different way. I think Broadway didn't perceive that they had a horror audience. It was very much an art house cinema.
Okay, got you.
So they didn't see the horror audience as being their audience. At the time, Chris Cooke was working for a short film festival called Bang. And Bang had been getting submissions from like horror filmmakers who were submitting horror short films.
Got you.
So we kind of said, okay, why don't we just do a short film night? We'll just do, a bunch of short horror films, and we'll show them. And we went to Broadway with that idea, and they said yes this time, because it was a spin-off from Bang and it was more manageable, and we'd see where it would go. The first edition was held in May, which is where the name comes from, Mayhem.
Okay.
Which doesn't make any sense now we're in October, but it's it's a good overall kind of name. So that was the initial kind of setup. That went down really well, and then the next year we did it again. And then we started doing shorts plus a feature. So we do a special preview feature. And then in 2008, we decided to do the first kind of weekend. And so we did 3 days of new horrors, some kind of archive stuff, and still with a short film showcase in the middle of it. In that first edition, we were lucky enough to have a special guest of Mark Gatiss, who I'd known through he's like a friend of my sister-in-law, who's a costume designer. She does loads of like film and TV costume design. So she knew him, and we managed to kind of finagle to get him down and do a kind of a thing called What Are You Scared Of?, where he talked about his horror influences for an hour on stage. So that helped to really sell the idea, and because we got a lot of interest in that. So that sold the idea to Broadway that there was a kind of audience there. And so, that was the beginnings of what it is now. So when we first thought of it, it wasn't, let's do a 4-day film festival. It was literally like, let's do a short film festival and see where that goes. But I think, since about 2008, we've just built on that structure of like 4 days, mostly previews, some archive with a short film showcase or two, as we have now, at the center of it.
Now, you've obviously covered most of what is the 21st century of with your festival. How do you perceive how horror's changed from what would be the beginning of the millennium up to where we are now, a quarter of the way into the century?
I mean, I think horror, especially in the past kind of 10, 15 years, has just been in a really, really good place. I mean, what's really interesting is now, like I said before, that Broadway didn't really see the horror audience as their audience. And to be honest, that probably took 6 or 7 years for that to change.
Yeah.
We had to work quite hard to make them see that was a valid audience. And it wasn't just this kind of like, I think they were imagining that it's all kind of like 6'2" goths with like heavy metal t-shirts, which is some part of our audience, but it's not all of our audience.
Yeah.
So they didn't see it as being like, that's our audience. But we did an event where we had Nicholas Rogue came to Nottingham. We showed Don't Look Now in the local church. And that was the thing I think that changed the perception of the festival as being something, okay, well, there is a crossover here between kind of like horror fans and kind of, proper, film fans. But yeah, to get back onto your point, it's I think that if you look at Broadway now and what they're showing, and they'll be showing Sinners, and they'll be showing, I think they showed The Monkey, and they showed Bring Her Back, and they're, you've got all of these more mainstream kind of horror films, but also quite kind of full-on horror films in terms of something like Bring Her Back. They are showing here at Broadway, and there is an audience, and horror is much more in the mainstream than it was, I think, when we started out. And there is much more variety in horror, I think, in terms of who's making horror, what horror's about. And, thankfully you get, fewer of those kind of responses to horror, which are people just imagining it's a guy chasing a woman naked through the woods wielding a chainsaw. That for a lot of years was the perception of horror, it's just this misogynist kind of genre where it's just scantily clad women getting killed. And it's like, well, it's not, that's a really old fashioned version of horror now. And now horror is, everything from, from Sinners to Long Legs to, to Talk to Me, to Bring Her Back, to, you've got all of these kind of strands of horror, to The Substance. You've got all of these different strands of horror, which are not just kind of, big with audiences, but big with critics as well. They get, you got The Substance being nominated for Oscars like last year, which is kind of crazy when you think, in terms of the kind of stuff that
Titan win the Palme d'Or.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of crazy when you look at where horror was sort of 20 years ago. So, I mean, I think that, this year looking at films for the program, we had a fantastic selection. There was great stuff out there. We can't always get everything that we want, but there was, we were seeing more and more like really, really good, strong horror films.
So what, in terms, another thing about horror becoming mainstream is it's also become a much more globalized market. Then it's not just about American or UK horror anymore, is it?
No, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I really love about the festival and our audience is that, we show films from all over the world, from pretty much every continent, from Africa, from South America, from Asia, you can show them to our audience and say, oh, we've got this, Thai film about, I don't know, the haunted house or whatever. And there's no stars in it you've ever heard of. You never heard of the director, but it's great. It's subtitled. And the audience will go, yeah, great. Fuck it. Brilliant. Do you know what I mean? I think one of the attractions for people coming to Mayhem and festivals like Mayhem, because there are, a load of great horror film festivals and genre film festivals out there now, is that they get to see stuff that they wouldn't see anywhere else. I literally just saw one of our sort of Mayhem regulars on the street outside, and he said exactly that to me. I come to Mayhem because I know that I'm not going to see these films anywhere else. And I want to be surprised. I want to be, I don't read up about any of the films. I just want to like be there and have this stuff just thrown at me.
Because I remember seeing Train to Busan, and it's a zombie film. You have lots of expectations about a zombie film. One of them wasn't to be bawling my eyes out at the end of the movie.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's it. And I think that horror is such a sort of nimble and agile kind of genre that it can do that. It can horrify you, it can terrify you, it can also move you. I think that the more good horror you get, the more people are influenced by horror, and the more people who are drawn to it and see it as an attractive genre. So you get more filmmakers deciding to go into horror or working with horror, and trying out new things with it.
Yeah, because I guess the trailblazer in sort of mainstream sense would have been Blumhouse, and then off the back of Blumhouse came, which probably would have been where Broadway got, along with what you were doing, but in terms of what programming they were getting to put out as releases, the likes of Neon and A24 suddenly are presenting Broadway with films that are not so obtuse. I mean, I think horror for years was treated a bit like heavy metal is in music.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was this derivative, this reductive version that everyone, and you could never guess which one it is, but everyone had a reductive version who was critical. And then there'd be this thing, and then a broadsheet would go, "Oh, horror's back." And you're like, it never went anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, horror's never gone anywhere. And there was a period where sort of elevated horror was the buzzword, and there was this idea that there was almost like two tiers of horror. There was just your kind of basic kind of ground level horror, and then there was elevated horror, which was somehow better and had more to say. And it's not true. Horror films have always had stuff to say, and horror films have always been about really big themes. What happens when you die? Why do people want to hurt you? What's inside of me? Those are all like massive themes that horror is exploring all of the time. But I think there was, definitely with the rise of, things like A24. I think probably Hereditary was a real sort of marker point for that, in terms of like, even though at the heart, it's I don't know, there's nothing that Hereditary is doing that hasn't been done in other horror films.
It's M.R. James. It's just a curse.
Yeah, exactly. But there's something about the filmmaking that made it feel different to audiences. I also think, there has been a kind of change in audiences, where audiences are now kind of more open to horror.
For this year then, what in terms of the programme then, do you want to, as it's 3 films that have impacted everything in your life, give us 3 highlights of, not to be too unfair to the ones you don't mention, but give us 3 particular highlights people should look forward to at Mayhem this year.
Well, our opening film, we've got Game, directed by John Minton, which is the first film from Invader Films, which is Jeff Barrow from Portishead, his production company. And it's co-starring Jason Williamson from Sleaford Mods. And it's a very, this is one we saw quite late on in terms of our viewing. And it's a very tight, taut, kind of contained thriller about 2 men, which is in this very kind of, I don't want to say too much. It's always a way with these films. I don't want to spoil too much. But in a very kind of taut situation. And it's set around the rave scene in the 90s. So we've got the UK premiere of that on our opening night. That's one that I think is really worth looking out for. We've also got Ben Wheatley coming with his new film Bulk.
Amazing film.
Yeah. Which is really interesting because it's Ben. Ben seems to Ben's been to Broadway and Mayhem, I think like 5 or 6 times now. So he's a real friend of the festival and the cinema, and it's always interesting to talk to him. And we've spoken to him about High Rise and Free Fire, but then there's things like In the Earth. So he has this kind of, he's bouncing between these kind of bigger budget, star-driven vehicles and this kind of lower budget stuff that's kind of really inventive. And with Bulk, it's a kind of super inventive, kind of mind-fucking kind of sci-fi
interdimensional.
Yep.
Where's reality? I don't know.
Yep. That is really a love letter to kind of practical effects and real kind of like lo-fi filmmaking.
I've not thought of it that way.
Yeah. So I think, and that's, and it's always good to talk to Ben. I'm really looking forward to putting that in front of the audience. And another one, let me think, Redux Redux by Kevin and Matthew McManus, which is a sci-fi thriller about a woman who is traveling the multiverse, repeatedly killing the man who killed her daughter. It's great. It's got a fantastic central performance.
What a great concept.
And it's a really great concept. So that's playing on the Friday night. Yeah.
Fantastic. Right, then let's remind people then, when is Mayhem?
Mayhem is 16th to the 19th of October at Broadway Cinema in Nottingham.
Fantastic. Right then, sir, let us move swiftly along to 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. You have given me 3 titles. We will do them in the order you've given me. Ordinarily, dear listener, I would have some notes, but in my haste to leave my house today, I didn't. So I'm flying naked, it feels like, but I think we'll be okay. The rules are simple. Every time we start a film, we get 5 minutes, and when we hear this sound, that will mean 5 minutes are up. As in the immortal words of Magnus Magazine, I've started or finished. I will let you finish the sentence. Obviously, we're not animals on this podcast, but it is just so we make sure we get 5 minutes conversation on each movie. Okay. First out the gate is a 1973, almost I'd say anthology movie, but it's not. Just the chapter approach to it. Theatre of Hate, Theatre of Blood, even. Starring Vincent Price in some amazing wigs. Tell us why this film had an impact on you and why it is so memorable.
When I was a kid growing up, I watched a lot of horror and probably a lot of inappropriate stuff when, myself and my brother. And horror was like the first genre I was into. So we watched a lot of like late night horror on TV. Mm-hmm. And Theatre of Blood was one of the films that really stuck with me. And one of the films that I think really embedded in me in terms of like disturbing me. I think the opening scene with Michael Horden, where he is stabbed to death by a bunch of homeless people and his face presses up against the polythene, for some reason, really freaked me the fuck out.
Tonally, tonally, it's not the start of that film, is it?
No. It's really, really horrible, and it really, really stuck with me and really like disturbed me. And I love the rest of the film, but that moment, there was that moment. The other moment was the death of Anna Massey in Hitchcock's Frenzy, which was another one I saw much too young, really inappropriate, but saw that and that really stuck with me. And I think, there's something about the era of like 1970s British horror that I really love and has really kind of influenced me. And even though Theatre of Blood is a more kind of, in a way, sort of higher budget and sort of respected kind of horror film, that kind of era where British horror was moving out from kind of sexploitation into exploitation. You have filmmakers like Pete Walker who are making his kind of films. I think there's something that really sort of resonates with me because it shows kind of the 1970s like as they were, almost like better than any documentary. You've got all of these kind of like great British actors who are kind of like, probably in their view, slumming it by being in these kind of sexploitation or exploitation films. Yeah. And getting murdered or, having to, appear as scantily clad women or whatever. But there's something about the sort of tone of them. They're so sort of grubby. There's a kind of grubbiness that I associate with the 70s and a real kind of sleaziness that I think is really, really, really interesting.
Not a scene in that film was shot in a studio. It was all shot on location in London, even the interiors.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think makes it just a social history document.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of those, a lot of the films around that time were very similar because of budget reasons. Like they couldn't afford to build these kind of big sets, and they just like, okay, let's find a house, and so you see the same streets happening over and over again. Especially if you watch any kind of like confessions movies or anything like that. Which are different, but again, it's a similar kind of period where you've got these kind of films that were, at the time, making a lot of money as well. These sexploitation, exploitation films were making a lot of money in the British film industry, and that lasted until sort of mid sort of 70s when it all kind of died off.
So where did you see this film for the first time?
It would have been on TV. Just would have been on TV. Yeah, late night horror double bill they used to do. I remember watching it on TV and just being really kind of totally freaked out. There was but it's such a great cast in that film, and Vincent Price is so brilliant, and there's a lot of humor to it. But like you say, tonally, that opening scene just feels like it's from almost like a different kind of movie.
Yeah, that's more Pete Walker, isn't it?
Yeah. There's something so genuinely kind of terrified, I think, about Michael Horden's performance, and something that's I think it's just horrible. It's and also you can argue about the merits of this, but the homeless people are seen like a sort of zombie horde. They're just seen as this kind of like mindless kind of like mob. So it feels like something out of like Night of the Living Dead or something, where you've got these, this mob coming to kill him. So it was definitely that. The Michael Horden's face pressing up against the polythene covered in blood. It was like just this kind of pivotal kind of moment for me in terms of horror.
And I guess if you were to try and make that film now, it wouldn't make as much sense, because the critic, which is the sort of antagonist to Vincent Price protagonist, even though obviously he's a killer. They don't have that power. I mean, obviously it's a heightened version of the power that a critic holds, but critics were once important, and the film is having a joke about that, isn't it? But
no, absolutely. I think now Vincent Price would be killing like TikTokers or something.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, he'd be killing people. Whoever would be, leading pylons on Twitter or whatever. So it's definitely a kind of time capsule for something like that, because critics now don't have quite the same cachet as they did back in like 1973.
No, and I think it's almost like peak 70s in terms of like that mishmash. I'll never get to say what it was a mishmash of. Right then, how was that for you? Was that okay? That 5 minutes?
Yeah, good. Yeah,
nice one. Okay, right then. Kicking off again, we are jumping over to Italy for your next film, Argento's 1975 movie Deep Red, which I believe was introduced to you by your fellow Mayhem co-founder Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I moved to Nottingham in like the early 90s, and then around sort of mid 90s, I fell in with a crowd who were starting to make films. Basically, it was Nottingham's never really had like a film school or anything like that. So the place where people made films was essentially this training, production and facilities house called Intermedia that had like public funding, that was based actually in the basement of the building we're in now, Broadway.
Oh wow!
And it's where Shane Meadows first started, because he would volunteer in the facilities part of Intermedia, and in return for a day's volunteering, he would get a day on the equipment. So that's what he used to make his first sort of short films.
Okay.
So all around this time, there was this kind of burgeoning kind of film scene, and it was all shot on video, and it was all kind of like people making their own stuff, because they had to. There was nothing else here. Like no film school. Nobody was teaching film, so it was just people making up their own stuff. I started kind of getting involved in that scene, and through that met Chris Cooke, who was also involved in the scene. And Chris lent me the DVD of Deep Red, because he said, "I think you'll like this." And I did. I absolutely loved it, and that really got me into Argento. I think I'd seen some Argento before when I was younger, because in the sort of video nasties kind of era. But seeing Deep Red and seeing something that was where you had the image, the lighting, the music, just working so well together, that Argento does. That idea that you could have a film that was just sort of composed like that. Reminiscent of like Powell and Pressburger, with something like The Red Shoes or Tales of Hoffman, where you've got like, you've got the camera and the soundtrack and everything working, to create what you're seeing on screen, but also that Argento kind of works often in the idea of the sequence, right? Rather than the scene, there's a sequence. So something, you have like the scene with the psychic in Deep Red, where it's like a sequence. It's almost like a set piece, And you get that a lot in Suspiria, like the opening kind of 10 minutes or so of Suspiria is just like a set piece, a sequence. It's this kind of almost like this suite of music that is kind of ebbs and flows. And Argento does that so well. So that introduction to Argento, or reintroduction to Argento, was really important to me in terms of getting me kind of back into horror and just kind of going, fucking hell yeah, horror can really be this as well.
Because it's not unfair to say he's quite operatic, isn't it? His films, they're not reliant wholly on plot.
No. I mean, and that's the thing that I think can put some people off his films is if you're looking for a really taut kind of plot. And my favorite film of Argento's is probably Inferno, which was the sequel to Suspiria. And a lot of that is kind of vibes, a lot of that is just atmosphere and vibes, and again, music and lighting and set pieces. The opening set piece of Inferno is incredible. So it's just a different way of it's a different style of filmmaking to, I suppose, a lot of other maybe British or American filmmakers, apart from, like I say, somebody like Powell and Pressburger, where they're again working with color and lighting and performance and music and putting together like sequences. Do you know what I mean? Whole, that are like composed to work well with the music. And obviously Goblin's music is such an integral part of those kind of, that slate of Argento's films that it's impossible to kind of divorce it.
I mean, also as well, it's hard to imagine that music would have sustained as a iconic piece of music had it just been released as music. And yet it is enjoyed in isolation by lots of genre fans.
No, absolutely. It is one of my ringtones, I think, on my phone, along with the soundtrack to The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, which is absolute banger. Chris introduced me to that, and I think it was one of the things that I think I kind of drifted a little bit away from horror when I was at university, because I was doing like English literature and getting much more, into kind of, into that. And then, once I kind of got back into it, I remembered like, just being younger and that being the genre. It was that and comic books that I was really into as a kid. Being really into horror and
being really into horror. Do you want to finish that thought?
That's fine. I can't remember what I was going to say.
Brilliant. Right then, sir. For your final choice, one of the best horror films ever made, I would say. One of my favourite films ever. I think largely due to the fact that it was banned in the UK for such a long time and I wasn't allowed to watch it. So when I did get to see it, it didn't disappoint. I'm talking about 1974's Texas Chain Saw Massacre. So this had an influence on you directly in terms of filmmaking, yeah?
Absolutely, yeah. I think when I made my first feature as writer-director, Mum and Dad, in 2008, I think we even pitched it as the Heathrow Airport Chainsaw Massacre. It was that sort of, so much part of the DNA of the film, alongside, as I've already discussed, the kind of like Pete Walker kind of 1970s kind of really grubby, sleazy kind of British horror. That was the other kind of part of it. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, for my money, the greatest horror film ever made. And it's really difficult to talk about because it's like so much has been said about it. I mean, there's a documentary coming out soon called Chain Reactions, which is...
is there?
Yeah, which is... it's Patton Oswalt, Stephen King, Miike Takahashi, Karen Kusama, and the brilliant Australian critic Alexandra Heller Nicholas talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it's like, I'm not sure I've got anything to say about it that would be better than any of those fantastic people. But I think there's something so important, and we were talking about atmosphere with Argento. With Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it is just so, the atmosphere of that film, it feels ugly, it feels sweaty, it feels fetid, it feels like everything is cosmically wrong. Do you know what I mean? It's just, it's a film like unlike any other, from the opening kind of shots in the graveyard and the flashes and just everything is just kind of wrong.
An armadillo on its back.
Yeah. And it's amazing when you look at the kind of, how they made that film and the creation of that film and how difficult it was, and how little they were kind of working with. It's just so incredibly effective. And I think one of the things about it is that, in terms of it being kind of like a different type of horror, I think it was one of the things where horror was not something that was kind of overlaid onto our world, like a ghost or something that was brought into our world. It said that, horror is inherent in the world. And, basic things like, family, home, food were shown to be monstrous. Do you know what I mean? It's not like they were inherently monstrous. There's no escaping from it. It's not like you can defeat the horror of this world. It's the horror is deeply embedded in the world and in familial structures and in the sense of home and in the sense of what we eat. It's deeply embedded in that, in a way you can't escape it. So even like the end of that film where she's on the back of the truck, it's like, you're not escaping.
Yeah.
There is no escape from this world. This is the world.
Yeah. You'll never recover. It doesn't matter. You can drive 1,000 miles and you're never going to, that memory's never going to leave you.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is just so sort of now within you. So it's so good as a horror film that, and every time they try and remake it. I mean, I didn't mind the first remake they did in the early 2000s. I think we went to see that when my wife was 9 months pregnant with our daughter. So I have a strong memory of seeing that and not minding it, even though it wasn't the same. But then there was a recent Netflix remake, which I think the least said about that, the better, really.
Well, I think it'd have been all right as a horror film, but I think calling it a Texas Chainsaw horror film is not on, really.
No, I think what's really hard is that you can't replicate what they caught with that film.
I mean, I was reading about why it got, before I came to speak to, I was reading about why it got banned, and I couldn't find any reasons. But what I could find is that what the BBFC struggled with is what they normally would do is get rid of the gory bits. And the great thing about Texas Chainsaw is it puts everything in your imagination, and it's about the edit as much as it is about what was shot.
Yeah, absolutely, and and you can't censor the vibe of a film. You can't like. They'd have to cut the whole thing because there's hardly any violence in it. And I think if there was any influence, the particular influence it had on my filmmaking, especially in terms of Mum and Dad, was I wanted to make something that tried to have that feel like everything is wrong. Everything in this world is wrong.
Yeah.
And that you would feel a bit, I don't know if this is an admirable thing to admit, but you'd feel a bit grubby coming out of the film. Just how I feel coming out of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You feel a bit kind of like, defiled almost, because it's just like, like I said, the whole world is fetid and wrong.
It's been done to you.
It's something that's been done to you. We were talking, before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about Martyrs, and Martyrs has that similar kind of feeling of like, you feel punched in the face by it.
Indeed. Well, look, sir, that brings us to the end of 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. They were great. They were great selection and great stories attached. Let's remind people, when is Mayhem?
Mayhem is from the 16th to the 19th of October at Broadway Cinema in Nottingham.
Brilliant. Well, it just gives me to say thank you very much for giving us your time on the Britflicks podcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Do remember to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, follow on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more movies that impacted your life. And if you want to, I'd love to know what your favourite movies are, what your fondest movie memories are. So please share your favourite movies that impacted your life on Twitter. Look for @LaytonRocks. And you can always leave me a review, 5-star preferably. And in your review, tell us which 3 films impacted your life. Best ones get read out on the podcast.
Hey there. Hugh from Moderation here. If you like today's show, then why not have a listen to Why We Roll, the dedicated TTRPG design podcast. It's hosted by White and Chris, 2 professional TTRPG designers, and it's all about talking to the people that make our favourite games in the tabletop world and understanding what goes into that decision-making process. How you build something that's not just fun to play, but fun to experience. And we're not talking about how we roll, but learning why exactly we make those decisions. Check it out on our website at poderation.com.